had the keys in my pocket, the car in the driveway, and my heart racing with excitement. I'd saved for 2 years to buy Sarah the silver Honda CR-V she'd been dreaming about since our first date. I imagined her face lighting up, her arms around my neck, maybe even happy tears. But when I quietly opened our front door, ready to yell surprise, I froze. The scene before me wasn't what I expected. Not even close. And in that moment, everything I thought I knew about my marriage shattered into 1,000 pieces. Hey beautiful souls. How's everyone doing today? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I'm so grateful you clicked on this video. If you're new here, this channel is all about real stories, real emotions, and real life. Hit that subscribe button because trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Jack Deckard had the keys in his pocket, the car in the driveway, and his heart racing with excitement. He'd saved for 2 years to buy Rose the silver Honda CR-V she'd been dreaming about since their first date. Working overtime shifts in secret, cutting expenses, selling his prized baseball card collection. All worth it to see her face light up when he surprised her. The afternoon sun glinted off the new car's pristine paint as Jack parked it in front of their modest suburban home. His palms were sweaty against the key fob as he checked his reflection in the window. 2 years of sacrifice, of coming home late, of missed dinners and weekends spent working instead of with his wife. But it would all be worth it when she saw what he'd done for her. She's going to freak out, he whispered to himself, a nervous smile playing on his lips. He'd planned to walk her outside blindfolded, place the keys in her hand, and watch as she realized what he'd done. Jack quietly opened the front door, ready to call out for Rose, when he froze in place. The scene before him wasn't what he expected. Not even close. Rose was on her knees in the living room, surrounded by dozens of handmade cards, photos spread in a timeline across the floor, and a cake on the coffee table that read, "Happy 2 years cancer-free, my love." When she looked up and saw him standing there, her face crumbled into tears. And in that moment, everything Jack thought he knew about his marriage shattered into 1,000 pieces. "Jack!" Rose whispered, her voice breaking. The scissors she'd been using to cut decorative paper fell from her fingers. "You're home early." Jack stood frozen in the doorway, his mind racing to process the scene before him. Rose had transformed their living room into a celebration. Photos from their life together hung from strings attached to the ceiling. Handmade cards with messages of love and gratitude were arranged in a heart shape on the floor, and balloons in Jack's favorite color floated in the corners of the room. I was planning to surprise you when you got home at 6, Rose said, wiping tears from her cheeks. "Today marks 2 years since my last treatment. 2 years cancer-free." The words hit Jack like a physical blow. Of course he knew the date. Somewhere deep in his mind, he knew. But he'd been so focused on the car, on his surprise, that he'd overlooked what today really meant. 2 years ago, when Rose was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer at just 32, Jack had crumbled inside. The woman he loved more than anything in the world, the one with the bright laugh who danced in the kitchen while making Sunday breakfast, suddenly faced her own mortality. And Jack, terrified of losing her, had done what he thought was practical. He buried himself in work. Extra shifts at the architectural firm, weekend consultations, anything to pay for the best treatment, the best doctors. Anything to avoid sitting in hospital waiting rooms watching chemotherapy drain the color from Rose's face. Anything to escape the helplessness that consumed him when he couldn't fix what was breaking her. "I thought you'd forgotten," Rose said softly, looking at the decorations around her. "You've been so distant lately. Even more than during the treatment." Jack remembered how Rose had faced her cancer, with a quiet strength that still amazed him. She'd lost her hair and simply said, "Now I can try all those hat styles I've been pinning." When the nausea kept her up at night, she never complained. Instead, she'd started a journal about constellations she could see from their bedroom window during those sleepless hours. "I could never forget, Rose," Jack said, but the word sounded hollow even to him. Because in truth, he had pushed those memories away. The image of Rose in a hospital bed, the sound of her retching in the bathroom after treatments, the way her once vibrant body had seemed to fold in on itself, he'd locked those memories away and thrown himself into work. And after she recovered, he kept working, kept saving. For the car. The doorbell rang, shattering the tense silence between them. "That's probably Natasha," Rose said, rising from the floor. "She's been helping me plan this for weeks." Natasha Spencer had been Rose's best friend since college. When Jack had been absent during Rose's treatments, Natasha had stepped in, driving Rose to appointments, staying overnight when the pain was too much, even shaving her own head in solidarity when Rose lost her hair. "Hey, why's the door closed? You didn't start without me, did you?" Natasha called as she walked in, arms full of grocery bags. She stopped when she saw Jack. "Oh, you're early." The accusation in her tone was unmistakable. "Natasha brought food for the surprise party," Rose explained, her voice small. "We invited your parents, my sister, the friends who helped us through everything. They'll be here at 6. Jack's stomach twisted. A party. People coming to celebrate something he'd nearly forgotten, while he'd been planning to surprise her with a car. A car she'd once mentioned wanting, back before cancer changed everything. "Rose, Jack started, but Natasha cut him off. "I'll get these in the kitchen," she said, giving Jack a look that clearly said they would talk later. Natasha had never hidden her disapproval of how Jack handled Rose's illness. When they were alone again, Rose looked up at him with eyes that still held so much love, despite everything. "I found all the cards everyone sent during my treatment," she said, gesturing to a scrapbook on the coffee table. "Remember how your mom sent one every single day for 6 months? And how your dad called every night to tell me a terrible joke?" Jack nodded, his throat tight. His parents had been there for Rose in ways he should have been. "I wanted to thank everyone properly," Rose continued, "to celebrate being alive with the people who helped me stay that way." The unspoken words hung in the air between them. "You weren't one of those people." "Not really." Jack's phone buzzed in his pocket, probably the dealership checking that everything went well with the surprise. The car keys felt like they were burning a hole through his jeans. "I've been saving these too," Rose said quietly, pulling out a small wooden box from under the coffee table. "I wrote you letters during treatment. Things I couldn't say out loud because I was afraid of burdening you even more." She handed him the box. Inside were dozens of folded papers, some on hospital stationery, others on pages torn from her journal. Each one addressed to him. Each one unread. "Why didn't you give these to me?" Jack asked, his fingers trembling as he held the first letter. "Because you weren't there," Rose said simply, without accusation. "And when you were, you seemed so distant. Like you couldn't bear to look at me. I thought maybe if I wrote it down instead." Jack unfolded the first letter. "Dear Jack, today was hard. Dr. Bennett says the nausea should ease soon, but right now it feels like my body is revolting against itself. I miss you. I know you're working late again, and I understand why. But sometimes I just want you to hold my hand and tell me ghost stories like you did on our first camping trip. Remember how you made up that ridiculous tale about the phantom lumberjack just to have an excuse to keep me close in the tent? I could use a ghost story tonight." Jack couldn't read anymore. The shame was too overwhelming. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he whispered. "Working more, saving for our future, making sure we had security after all the medical bills." Rose touched his hand gently. "I never needed security, Jack. I needed you." Before the conversation could continue, Natasha called from the kitchen. "Rose, where did you put the photo album from the remission celebration?" "I should help her," Rose said, standing up. "People will be here soon. We can talk more after." As she walked away, Jack remained rooted in place, the box of unread letters in his hands, the car keys in his pocket, and the realization that for 2 years, he'd been trying to solve the wrong problem. By the way, if you're watching this and haven't subscribed yet, don't break my heart like that. Tap the button. These stories of human connection are what we are all about here, and I'd love for you to join our family. Jack sat alone in the living room, surrounded by Rose's carefully crafted decorations, feeling like an intruder in his own home. The box of unread letters weighed heavily on his lap as muffled sounds of Natasha and Rose arranging things in the kitchen drifted through the house. He opened another letter at random, his heart clenching as he read. "Dear Jack, I named my tumor today. Eleanor Roosevelt. Because she's unwelcome, but I'm determined to learn something from her anyway. The nurse laughed when I told her. I wish you'd been there to hear it. You always said my weird humor was why you fell in love with me." The sound of the front door opening made Jack look up. It was Maya, another of Rose's friends who had stepped up during her treatment. She carried a bouquet of sunflowers, Rose's favorite. "Jack," she said, surprised. "Rose said you'd be working late." "That was the plan," he replied, quickly folding the letter and placing it back in the box. "But I came home early." Maya nodded. a look of understanding passing over her face. She's been planning this for weeks, you know. Even when she was too exhausted from therapy sessions, she'd still work on those scrapbooks. Therapy sessions? Jack's confusion must have shown on his face. She didn't tell you? Maya asked, her voice dropping. Rose has been seeing Dr. Caldwell twice a week for the past 3 months. She said it was helping her process everything. Before Jack could respond, Rose emerged from the kitchen, her face brightening at the sight of a friend. Maya, you're early too. The women embraced, and Jack noticed how naturally affectionate they were, how easily Rose smiled with her friends. It had been months since she'd smiled at him that way. I brought your favorites, Maya said, handing over the sunflowers. They're perfect, Rose replied, then glanced at Jack. Would you mind putting these in water while I finish up in the kitchen? Jack nodded, taking the flowers and retreating to the kitchen where Natasha was arranging a charcuterie board. She gave him a cool look but said nothing as he searched for a vase. While filling the vase with water, Jack noticed Rose's purse on the counter, partially open. Inside was a prescription bottle with Dr. Caldwell's name on it. Antidepressants. His wife was on antidepressants, seeing a therapist, and he hadn't known. What else had he missed while chasing overtime and secret savings? Jack returned to the living room with the arranged flowers to find Rose sitting on the couch, holding something in her hands. Her face was pale. Rose? What's wrong? She looked up at him, her eyes swimming with tears. I was looking for my phone charger in your office desk. I found this instead. In her hand was a small black phone, the prepaid one Jack had been using to coordinate his extra work with clients and the dealership. He'd bought it specifically to keep his surprise secret, making calls during lunch breaks or when Rose thought he was working late. I've suspected for months, she whispered. The late nights. The secretive calls. How you'd shower as soon as you got home. The way you'd change the subject whenever I asked about work. Jack's blood ran cold as he realized what she was implying. Rose, it's not. When I found this today, she continued, her voice breaking, I almost cancelled everything. The party, the surprise, all of it. I really thought you were having an affair. The vase nearly slipped from Jack's hands. He set it down carefully on the coffee table before sitting beside her, maintaining a careful distance. Rose, I swear to you, I have never been unfaithful. That phone. Natasha convinced me to go through with the party, Rose interrupted. She said maybe I was wrong, that I should talk to you before jumping to conclusions. That's why I wrote you this. She handed him an envelope from under the pile of decorations. Inside was a card, beautifully decorated but filled with heartbreaking words. Jack, if what I suspect is true, this will be our last celebration together. But before anything ends, I needed you to know how much your love once meant to me, and how grateful I am for the support you gave me before things changed. Whatever happened to us, I forgive you. I hope someday you'll forgive me too, for not being enough after I got sick. Not being enough. Jack echoed, his voice cracking. Rose, you were always more than enough. It was me who wasn't enough. Me who didn't know how to handle almost losing you. He reached for her hands, relieved when she didn't pull away. The phone was for work, yes, but not because I was cheating. I was taking on extra projects, coordinating with clients outside normal hours. I was saving for something. Rose looked at him, confusion and hurt warring in her expression. Saving for what? We agreed after my treatment that would prioritize living in the moment. That would spend more time together, not less. Jack took a deep breath. This wasn't how he'd planned to reveal his surprise, but nothing about this day was going according to plan. Come outside with me. Please. After a moment's hesitation, Rose nodded. Jack led her to the front door, aware that Maya and Natasha were watching cautiously from the hallway. As they stepped onto the porch, Rose gasped. Parked in their driveway was the silver Honda CR-V, still wearing the red bow the dealership had placed on it. You mentioned wanting one the night of our first date, Jack said quietly. Remember? We were driving back from the restaurant in my old Beater, and that commercial came on the radio. You said someday you'd like a CR-V because it was practical but still felt special. Rose stared at the car, then back at Jack, her expression unreadable. You've been working extra shifts for a car. For you, Jack corrected. I thought, after everything you went through, after all the medical bills, you deserve something that was just for you. Something to show you that we had a future together. Instead of the joy he'd imagined, Rose's eyes filled with fresh tears. While I was sick, terrified, and alone most nights, you were thinking about a surprise car. The words hit Jack like a physical blow. I wasn't alone because you were working, Jack. I was alone because you weren't present even when you were home. You couldn't look at me when I lost my hair. You wouldn't talk about what would happen if the treatment didn't work. You just disappeared into work. Rose hugged herself against the cool afternoon air. And when I got better, when I needed you to help me process what had happened, you still weren't there. Do you know who went with me to my first therapy appointment? Natasha. Do you know who held my hand when I had panic attacks about the cancer coming back? Maya. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Do you know who I cried to when I thought my husband was having an affair because he couldn't bear to look at his sick wife anymore? Your mother. Jack felt the ground shift beneath him. All this time, he thought he'd been protecting Rose by providing financial security, by working toward a future. Instead, he'd been running from the present, from the messy, frightening reality of almost losing her. The CRV was your dream from before, Rose said, looking at the gleaming new car. Before cancer. Before everything changed. I don't want things anymore, Jack. I just want moments. Real ones, even when they're hard. She turned back toward the house. People will be arriving soon. We should go back inside. As Rose walked past him, Jack caught her arm gently. Why didn't you tell me you were seeing a therapist? Rose's sad smile broke his heart. You never asked, Jack. You never asked how I was really doing. Before we continue, can I ask a tiny favor? If you're feeling this story in your heart right now, hit that subscribe button. Stories like these remind us all that communication is everything in relationships, and I share them because they matter. Your subscription helps these important messages reach more people who might need to hear them. Back inside, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken words. Natasha and Maya exchanged worried glances as Jack and Rose silently moved around each other, finishing preparations for a celebration that now felt hollow. Should we call everyone and cancel? Maya asked quietly, touching Rose's arm as they arranged wine glasses on the dining table. Rose shook her head. No. This party isn't just about Jack and me. It's about thanking everyone who helped me through the darkest time of my life. That celebration still matters. Jack overheard from the kitchen where he was helping Natasha with the food. The way Rose said everyone who helped me felt like another twist of the knife. He hadn't been part of that support system. Not really. You know, Natasha said in a low voice, sliding vegetable skewers onto a platter. She called me every night after her treatments. Not because she needed anything, but because she didn't want to burden you with how scared she was. Jack gripped the counter edge. I didn't know. That's the point, Natasha replied sharply. You didn't want to know. It was easier to work late than to watch her suffer. Before Jack could respond, the doorbell rang. The first guests had arrived, Rose's sister Amelia and her husband. Soon the house filled with friends and family, all there to celebrate Rose's milestone. Jack watched as each person embraced his wife with genuine warmth, many of them sharing inside jokes or referencing moments he knew nothing about. Remember when we snuck that milkshake into the chemo room? Rose's co-worker laughed. And that nurse pretended not to notice. Or when we had the midnight picnic in the hospital garden, another friend reminisced. You said the stars looked brighter when you had something to fight for. Each story was another revelation of moments Jack had missed, not because he couldn't be there, but because he had chosen not to be. During a quiet moment, Jack's mother pulled him aside in the hallway. She called me, you know, Eleanor Deckard said softly. About 3 months ago. Sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. Jack felt his throat tighten. The second phone. She thought I was having an affair. His mother nodded. I told her it wasn't possible, not the son I raised. But Jack, I didn't know what you were actually doing either. You shut everyone out after her diagnosis, including me and your father. I was trying to be strong, Jack said, the excuse sounding pathetic even to his own ears. No. His mother replied firmly. You were trying not to feel. There's a difference. The party continued around them, Rose at the center of it all, smiling, hugging, accepting congratulations on her health milestone. But Jack noticed how her eyes would occasionally dart to him, filled with a sadness that cut deeper than anger ever could. During a toast given by Rose's oncologist, Jack slipped away to the bedroom, needing a moment alone. He sat on the edge of their bed, the box of letters beside him. He pulled out another one, dated from the middle of Rose's treatment. Dear Jack, I had the dream again last night. The one where I'm trying to call you but no sound comes out. Dr. Bennett says anxiety dreams are normal during treatment, but this one feels different. I think I'm afraid of disappearing, not just from life, but from your heart. When you look through me instead of at me, I wonder if it's already happening. Jack closed his eyes, the pain almost unbearable. He remembered that period clearly, how he'd sleep on the couch claiming he didn't want to disturb her rest, when really he couldn't face the possibility of waking up to find her gone. The bedroom door opened softly, and Rose stood in the doorway. Everyone's asking where you went, she said. I'm sorry, Jack replied, quickly wiping his eyes. I just needed a minute. Rose nodded, then noticed the open letter in his hand. Which one is that? The one about your dream. About disappearing. She sat beside him, careful to maintain space between them. I had that dream for months, even after treatment ended. Sometimes I still do. Jack looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in 2 years. She was beautiful, not despite what she'd been through, but because of it. The strength in her eyes, the determined set of her mouth, the grace with which she carried both her scars and her healing. Why didn't you tell me you were seeing a therapist? He asked again. Rose sighed. At first, I tried. 3 different times, I mentioned Dr. Caldwell, but you always changed the subject. Eventually, I stopped trying. She looked down at her hands. The therapist helped me understand that your distance wasn't about me not being attractive anymore or being too much work. It was about your own fear. It was, Jack admitted. Am terrified of losing you. Every time I looked at you during treatment, all I could think was, what if this doesn't work? And I couldn't. I couldn't face that possibility. So instead of facing it with me, you ran from both the possibility and from me, Rose said quietly. Jack nodded, shame washing over him. And after you got better, I think I was afraid to fully come back. Afraid that if I let myself believe you were truly okay, somehow the cancer would return. That's exactly what I needed to talk about with you, Rose said, her voice breaking. Those fears. They didn't go away when the cancer did. They're still with me every day. The sounds of the party filtered through the closed door. Laughter, glasses clinking, music playing softly. A celebration of life going on without them. Do you remember the night before my first chemo session? Rose asked suddenly. I was so scared I couldn't sleep. I asked you to just hold me, to tell me everything would be okay even if you didn't believe it. Jack remembered. He'd made an excuse about needing to prepare some work for the next day and had spent the night at his desk, leaving Rose alone with her fears. Or my birthday during treatment. I asked if we could just drive somewhere, anywhere, to feel normal for a day. You said you had a deadline. I remember, Jack whispered. Or when I lost all my hair and cried for hours in the bathroom. I called for you, but you said you had a conference call and couldn't miss it. Each memory was like a physical blow. Jack had convinced himself he was doing the right thing, working to secure their future, to pay for treatments, to keep them financially stable. But in doing so, he'd sacrificed their present. The car, Rose continued, glancing toward the window where the silver CR-V was visible in the driveway. It's a beautiful gesture, Jack. But do you know what I really wanted these past 2 years? Jack shook his head, though he already knew the answer. I wanted you to sit with me through one chemotherapy session without checking your phone. I wanted you to hold my head when I was throwing up instead of leaving the room. I wanted you to look at my body after surgery and tell me I was still beautiful to you. A tear slipped down Jack's cheek. I failed you. You did, Rose agreed, her honesty both painful and necessary. But I failed us too. I should have demanded more from you instead of accepting your absence. I should have told you how alone I felt instead of protecting you from my pain. From downstairs, someone called Rose's name. I should get back, she said, standing. They're probably ready for the cake. Jack reached for her hand, a gesture that once would have been automatic between them. Can we talk more later? Really talk. Rose looked at their joined hands, then back at Jack's face. Yes. We need to. But Jack, I don't know if talking will be enough. There's so much damage, so much distance. As she turned to leave, Jack said, I love you, Rose. That never changed, even when everything else did. Rose paused at the door. I love you too. That's why this hurts so much. After she left, Jack picked up another letter, then another, reading through Rose's journey, her fears, her small triumphs, her loneliness, and through it all, her unwavering love for him despite his absence. Each word increased the weight of his guilt until it was almost unbearable. When he finally rejoined the party, Jack saw Rose surrounded by friends, laughing as she prepared to blow out candles on a cake that celebrated her victory over cancer. It should have been a moment of pure joy. Instead, it highlighted everything he'd missed by choosing to look away when she needed him most. And Natasha's eyes followed him across the room, her expression clear. You don't get to be the hero just because you bought her a car. She was right. The car sitting in the driveway wasn't a solution. It was a symbol of everything wrong with how he'd handled the past 2 years. Material compensation for emotional absence. Settle in, get comfortable. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that. This story is about to take us deeper into what happens when we finally face the truths we've been running from. You're safe here with us. The party continued with an undercurrent of tension that only Jack and Rose could feel. Outwardly, it was a celebration. Champagne flowed, stories were shared, and everyone marveled at Rose's strength and resilience. Jack moved through the crowd like a ghost, accepting congratulations for a battle he hadn't truly fought alongside his wife. Speech. Someone called as Rose prepared to cut her cake. Rose should give a speech. Everyone applauded, and Rose smiled, though Jack noticed it didn't reach her eyes. She cleared her throat and looked around the room at the faces of those who had supported her. 2 years ago, I didn't know if I'd be standing here, she began, her voice steady despite the emotion behind her words. Cancer doesn't just attack your body, it infiltrates every aspect of your life. Your sense of safety, your plans for the future, your relationships. Her eyes briefly met Jack's before continuing. Each of you in this room played a part in my recovery. You drove me to appointments, brought meals, sat with me during treatments, made me laugh when I didn't think I could. You showed up. And that's what healing really requires, people who show up, even when it's difficult, even when it's scary. The room was silent now, hanging on her every word. Someone once told me that surviving isn't the same as living, Rose continued. For a while after treatment, I was just surviving, going through the motions, afraid to hope for more. But standing here today, seeing all of you who carried me through my darkest hours, I know I'm ready to truly live again. Applause erupted, and Jack clapped alongside everyone else, though her words had struck him deeply. She'd been surviving after treatment, precisely when he thought things were getting back to normal. When he'd thrown himself even deeper into work for the surprise car. After the cake was served, Jack noticed Rose slip outside onto the back porch. Hesitantly, he followed her, finding her leaning against the railing, looking up at the early evening sky. Your speech was beautiful, he said quietly, standing beside her but not too close. Thank you, she replied. I meant every word. They stood in silence for a moment before Rose spoke again. I want to see it, she said suddenly. See what? The car, Jack. I want to really see it. Jack nodded, and they made their way through the house, quietly slipping out the front door while their guests continued celebrating inside. The silver CRV sat in the driveway, its newness standing out against their modest home. It's exactly like the one from the commercial, Rose said softly, running her hand along the hood. You remembered after all this time. I remember everything about that night, Jack replied. The way you laughed when I couldn't pronounce quinoa on the menu. How you had to show me which fork to use for the salad. The song that was playing when we had our first kiss in the parking lot. Rose smiled faintly at the memory. We were so young. So naive. Do you want to see inside? Jack asked, holding out the key fob. Rose took it hesitantly and unlocked the car. The interior was immaculate. Tan leather seats, advanced navigation system, all the features she'd once said would be nice to have. She sat in the driver's seat, her hands gripping the steering wheel. Jack expected to see joy, or at least appreciation, but instead, Rose's face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she stared straight ahead through the windshield. Rose? What's wrong? Jack asked, alarmed. You don't understand, she sobbed, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. This car. It's beautiful, Jack. It's thoughtful. It's exactly what I wanted, before I understood what really matters. She turned to look at him, her face raw with emotion. While you were working all those extra hours for this car, I was sitting in Dr. Caldwell's office trying to find the courage to leave you. The words hit Jack like a physical blow, driving the air from his lungs. Leave me. Rose nodded, wiping tears with the back of her hand. The party tonight, it wasn't just to celebrate being cancer-free or to thank everyone. It was going to be my goodbye too. I was going to ask for a separation afterward. Jack leaned against the car for support, his legs suddenly weak. Why? Rose, if this is about the second phone, I swear. It's not about the phone, Rose interrupted. It's about the 2 years of emotional absence. It's about surviving cancer only to find myself in a marriage that felt just as empty as my darkest days of chemo. It's about realizing that I beat death only to find myself not truly living. She stepped out of the car, facing him directly now. Do you know what Dr. Caldwell asked me in our first session? She asked what scared me most after cancer. And my answer wasn't recurrence or side effects or even death. It was the realization that my husband couldn't love me through the hard parts, that when things got scary, you checked out. That's not fair, Jack protested weakly. I was there. I paid the bills, I took care of everything practical. But you weren't emotionally present, Rose countered. And that's the part one needed most. I needed my partner, not my caretaker or provider. Hey there, if you're feeling the weight of this story as much as I am, please hit that subscribe button. These raw moments of truth remind us all what truly matters in our relationships, and your subscription helps these important messages reach others who might need to hear them. Jack stared at the car that had been the focus of his efforts for so long. All those extra hours, the secret planning, the anticipation of her reaction, none of it mattered if he lost her anyway. I've been seeing someone too, he admitted quietly. Rose looked at him sharply, her expression hardening. A therapist, Jack clarified quickly. Dr. Thomas. For about 6 months now. The surprise was evident on Rose's face. You've been in therapy? You never said anything. I didn't know how, Jack replied. It started after that night you had the panic attack, when you thought you felt a new lump. I called in sick the next day and found a therapist who specializes in families affected by cancer. Why wouldn't you tell me that? Rose asked, her voice softer now. Jack leaned back against the car, looking up at the darkening sky. Because I was ashamed. Dr. Thomas helped me see that I wasn't protecting you by working more. I was protecting myself. From feeling helpless. From the possibility of losing you. He turned to face her directly. I couldn't bear to watch you suffer, so I found ways to be physically absent. And when you got better, I was afraid to fully come back, afraid to believe it was real. So I focused on this grand gesture instead of just being with you. Rose was silent, processing his words. Dr. Thomas called it anticipatory grief, Jack continued. I started grieving you from the moment of your diagnosis, pulling away emotionally to protect myself from the pain of potentially losing you. And then I never found my way back. Rose's expression softened slightly. That's exactly what Dr. Caldwell said might be happening with you. I'm sorry I couldn't be what you needed, Jack said, his voice breaking. I thought I was being strong, but I was being a coward. Rose looked at the gleaming new car, then back at their house where their friends and family continued celebrating without them. We've both been running from the trauma instead of healing from it together. The car was supposed to fix everything, Jack said, the absurdity of it finally clear to him. As if a material thing could make up for emotional abandonment. It can't, Rose said simply. No thing ever could. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of revelation hanging between them. So what happens now? Jack finally asked, terrified of her answer but needing to hear it nonetheless. Rose looked at the car keys still in her hand, then back at Jack. I don't know. I've been planning to leave for months, but now. Now I know you've been hurting too, she said softly. Not just absent. And maybe that changes things. Maybe not. I honestly don't know. From inside the house, they could hear laughter and music, a celebration of life continuing without them, much as their marriage had become two separate lives running parallel but rarely intersecting. I do know one thing, Rose said, handing the keys back to Jack. This car isn't what I want anymore. What I want can't be bought. As they stood in the gathering darkness, the silver CRV between them seemed to symbolize everything wrong with their relationship, a beautiful exterior hiding an empty space where connection should be. They returned to the party, moving through the remainder of the evening like actors following a script. Jack made small talk with guests while Rose cut cake and accepted congratulatory hugs. To anyone watching, they might have seemed like the perfect couple celebrating a milestone, but the gulf between them had never been wider. As the last guests prepared to leave, Jack's father pulled him aside. "Son, I don't know what's going on between you two," he said quietly, "but I recognize that look. It's the same one your mother had before we separated for 6 months in '98. Jack looked at his father in surprise. "You and Mom separated? You never told me." "We worked it out," his father replied with a shrug. "But it took time apart to realize what we really had together. Sometimes distance provides clarity." After the final goodbyes, Jack and Rose stood in their living room, surrounded by the remnants of the celebration: empty glasses, cake plates, and congratulatory cards. The silence between them was deafening. "I think," Rose said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need some space tonight." Jack nodded, the words painful but not unexpected. "I'll pack a bag." "Just for tonight," Rose clarified. "I need to think. About everything." Jack moved mechanically through the bedroom, gathering essentials for an overnight stay. As he zipped his bag closed, Rose appeared in the doorway. "The letters," she said, gesturing to the wooden box on the bed. "Take them with you. Read them. Really read them." Jack took the box, holding it carefully. "Rose, no matter what happens." "Please," she interrupted, "not tonight. I can't have another emotional conversation right now. I'm exhausted." She looked at the celebration, the revelations, the emotional roller coaster of the day had drained the color from her face. Jack wanted nothing more than to hold her, but he knew he'd lost that right long ago. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said, walking past her with his bag and the box of letters. As he reached the front door, Rose spoke again. "Jack, the car payments, don't worry about them. We'll figure something out. Maybe sell it." Even now, she was thinking practically, considerately. Jack nodded and stepped out into the night, the door closing softly behind him. The hotel room was sterile and impersonal, beige walls, generic artwork, and a king-size bed that felt impossibly large for just one person. Jack sat on the edge of it, the box of letters open beside him, and began to read. Letter after letter revealed Rose's journey through cancer treatment, not just the physical toll, but the emotional one. Her fear not of dying, but of dying alone. Her gratitude for small moments of normalcy. Her worry that Jack was pulling away not because of work, but because he couldn't bear to look at her changed body. "Dear Jack," one letter began, "the nurse asked about my support system today. I lied and said you were amazing, that you were my rock. All the other patients had someone holding their hand during treatment. I had your photo on my phone. I pretended it was enough." Each word was a knife to Jack's heart. He'd convinced himself that his absence was necessary, that working more hours would somehow protect them both. In reality, he'd abandoned her when she needed him most. His phone rang, his mother's name appearing on the screen. "Mom, it's late," he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "I know, honey. I just wanted to check on you. You and Rose seemed off tonight." Jack closed his eyes, leaning back against the headboard. "She asked me to leave for the night." There was a pause before his mother spoke again. "Rose called me 3 months ago, you know, in tears." "I know. She told me. About the second phone, thinking I was having an affair." "That wasn't the only time she called," his mother said gently. "The first time was almost a year ago. She was afraid to tell you she was having nightmares about the cancer returning. She said whenever she brought up anything related to the illness, you would change the subject or find a reason to leave the room." Jack remembered those days, how he'd deliberately avoid conversations about checkups or symptoms, telling himself he was helping Rose move forward by not dwelling on the past. "She didn't want to burden you," his mother continued. Those were her exact words. "Jack has done so much already, I can't burden him with my fears too." As if a husband sharing his wife's fears is somehow a burden. The truth of those words hit Jack hard. He'd failed at the most fundamental aspect of partnership, being present through hardship. "I think I've lost her, Mom," he admitted, his voice breaking. Maybe, his mother replied honestly. But Rose loves you. That was clear even tonight, with everything else going on. The question is whether love is enough to rebuild what's broken. After hanging up, Jack returned to the letters, reading through the night until his eyes burned and his heart felt hollowed out. By dawn, he understood the full extent of his failure, not just as a husband, but as a human being connected to another human being in their most vulnerable moments. Meanwhile, back at their home, Rose sat alone in their bedroom, surrounded by the decorations from a party. The celebration that was meant to mark both an ending and a beginning now felt like neither. She picked up Jack's pillow, holding it against her chest. In the months after her recovery, she'd rehearsed the separation conversation dozens of times. She'd planned what to say, how to say it, even where they would sit when she asked him to move out. But now, knowing he'd been in therapy too, trying in his own misguided way to process what had happened, it complicated everything. Rose moved to Jack's desk to retrieve a pen, accidentally knocking over a stack of folders. As she bent to gather them, a small leather-bound journal fell open. She recognized it immediately, the notebook Jack carried everywhere but never explained. Privacy had become such an ingrained part of their relationship that she'd never asked about it. She knew she shouldn't read it. But after everything revealed today, after the car and the second phone and the letters, she needed to understand who her husband had become. The journal entries were dated, beginning shortly after her diagnosis. Rose has cancer. I can't write more than that right now. If I do, it becomes real. And later, second chemo session today. I told her I had a client meeting. Truth is, I sat in the parking lot of the hospital for 2 hours, trying to make myself go inside. I couldn't. What kind of man can't even sit with his wife during treatment? A coward. That's what I am. Rose turned the pages, her hands trembling. Rose's hair is falling out. She cried in the shower. I heard her but pretended I didn't. I can't bear to see her in pain. Work is the only place where cancer doesn't exist, where I can pretend our life is normal for a few hours. And then, dated just 3 months ago, Rose mentioned feeling a new lump today. False alarm, but I had a panic attack after she fell asleep. Called in sick to work and found a therapist. Dr. Thomas says I'm experiencing anticipatory grief, mourning Rose while she's still here. He's right. From the moment of her diagnosis, I've been preparing for a world without her. What I didn't realize is that I've already created that world by pulling away. Tears streamed down Rose's face as she continued reading, discovering that while she'd been writing him letters she never delivered, Jack had been filling journals with thoughts he never shared. Both of them silently screaming into the void, separated by fear and good intentions. The final entry was dated just last week, picked up the CRV today. The dealer thought I was crazy for paying in cash, but every dollar represents an hour I should have spent with Rose. I know a car can't fix what's broken between us, but maybe it can be a new beginning, a way to show her I'm ready to be present for whatever comes next. I'm terrified it's too late. Rose closed the journal, overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. Anger that Jack had kept his feelings hidden for so long. Relief that he hadn't been indifferent to her suffering, just paralyzed by his own. Sadness for the 2 years of connection they'd lost to fear and silence. She curled up on his side of the bed, clutching both the journal and her own unsent letters. Two people living under the same roof, experiencing the same trauma, yet completely alone in their pain. How had they drifted so far apart? And more importantly, was there any way back? As dawn broke, Rose and Jack lay awake in separate beds, each holding written evidence of the other's hidden heart, each wondering if it was too late to rebuild what fear had dismantled. If you're feeling this story in your heart right now, remember that one click can make a difference. Your subscription means we can keep bringing these powerful stories of love, loss, and healing to people who might see themselves in these moments. Don't miss what happens next. Hit that subscribe button and join our family. Morning light filtered through the hotel curtains as Jack sat at the small desk, surrounded by Rose's letters. He'd read each one multiple times through the night, the weight of her unshared pain crushing him. Sleep had been impossible. How could he rest knowing what Rose had endured alone? He pulled out a sheet of hotel stationery and began to write. Rose, I've spent the night reading your letters. Words cannot express my shame and regret for not being the partner you deserved during the hardest chapter of your life. I failed you in ways I'm only beginning to understand. You wrote that you were afraid of burdening me with your fears. The truth is, I was terrified of facing them with you. Every time you mentioned cancer, every doctor's appointment, every night you couldn't sleep, they were all reminders that I might lose you. So I ran. I buried myself in work, telling myself I was being practical, providing security. But I was really just being a coward. The car was never about making you happy. It was about making me feel better, giving me something concrete I could fix when I couldn't fix your cancer. I see that now. I don't know if our marriage can be saved. But I want you to know that I love you, not the person you were before cancer, but the incredible woman you've become through it. Strong, resilient, honest in ways I've never been. Whatever you decide about our future, I will respect it. But I want you to know I'm ready to do the real work, if you're willing to give me that chance. Yours always, Jack. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in his pocket. Whether Rose would read it or not, he didn't know. But writing the words felt like the first honest thing he'd done in 2 years. Meanwhile, Rose had risen early after a restless night. Jack's journal entries haunted her, especially the revelation that he'd sat in the hospital parking lot, paralyzed by fear, unable to come inside during her treatments. All this time, she'd thought he was simply absent. The truth was more complicated. She moved through their quiet house, gathering the party decorations and placing them in a box. As she cleared Jack's desk, she noticed his laptop was still open. She was about to close it when she noticed a folder on the desktop labeled simply Rose. Hesitating only briefly, she clicked it open. Inside were dozens of audio files, dated throughout her treatment period. With trembling fingers, she clicked on the first one. Jack's voice filled the room, shaky and raw. Rose had her first chemo today. I couldn't make myself go inside, so I'm sitting in the car recording this. I should be holding her hand right now, but instead I'm sitting here talking to myself like a lunatic. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to watch her suffer. Rose covered her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. She clicked another file, dated a month later. Rose lost her hair today. She looked at me for a reaction, and I couldn't give her one. What kind of monster can't even comfort his wife? She's fighting for her life, and I'm falling apart. This is why I stay at work. At least there, I can pretend to be functional. File after file revealed Jack's parallel journey through her illness, his fear, his shame, his inadequacy. In each recording, his love for her was evident, as was his complete inability to express it when faced with her suffering. The final recording was dated just after her last treatment. Rose's doctor said the treatment worked. She's going to be okay. I should feel nothing but joy, but I'm terrified to believe it. What if it comes back? What if this happiness is temporary? I don't know how to live in this uncertainty. I need to be stronger for her, but I don't know how. Rose sat back, overwhelmed. All this time, she'd thought Jack's distance was indifference, when it was actually paralysis. He'd been drowning in his own fear, unable to reach out even as she was drowning in hers. The doorbell rang, startling her from her thoughts. She wiped her tears and went to answer it, finding Natasha and Maya on her doorstep. "We brought breakfast and reinforcements," Maya said, holding up a bag of pastries. "How are you doing?" Rose let them in, grateful for their support but unsure how to explain the complicated emotions swirling inside her. They settled in the kitchen, and Natasha immediately took charge. "So, did you tell him you were planning to separate?" she asked, pouring coffee. Rose nodded slowly. "I did. But things are more complicated now." "Because of the car?" Maya asked gently. "No, not the car," Rose replied. "Because I found out Jack's been in therapy too. And I found recordings he made during my treatment, things he couldn't say to me directly." She gestured to the laptop, still playing Jack's voice memos in the other room. Natasha's expression softened. "He was really struggling, wasn't he?" "We both were," Rose admitted. "But neither of us knew how to reach the other. We were both drowning, just a few feet apart." As they talked, Rose's phone chimed with a text message from Jack. "I'm at the coffee shop around the corner. I'd like to talk when you're ready. No pressure." Rose showed the message to her friends. "I don't know what to do," she confessed. "Yesterday, I was so certain about leaving. Now, I don't know." Maya reached for Rose's hand. "What does your heart tell you?" "That I still love him," Rose whispered. "That maybe we've both been fighting our own battles instead of facing them together. Do you want me to go talk to him first?" Maya offered. as a neutral party. Rose considered this. Would you? Not to take sides, just to, I don't know, help us find a way to talk that doesn't end in tears or silence. Maya nodded, taking the address of the coffee shop. Before she left, Rose handed her Jack's journal. Give him this. Tell him I read it. And tell him I found the recordings too. After Maya left, Natasha sat with Rose on the couch. You know, when James was deployed, we went months without really talking. Not because we didn't have communication, but because we were both protecting each other from our fears. Rose looked at her friend in surprise. Natasha rarely spoke about the difficult periods in her own marriage. What changed? Rose asked. We started being honest about the hard parts, Natasha said simply. No more sugarcoating, no more protection. Just raw truth. It was painful at first, but it was the only way back to each other. At the coffee shop, Jack sat nursing his third cup, the letter to Rose burning a hole in his pocket. When Maya walked in, he was momentarily confused. Maya, is Rose okay? Maya sat across from him, placing his journal on the table. She found this. And the recordings. Jack closed his eyes, a complex mix of emotions washing over him. I never meant for her to hear those. They were just. I needed somewhere to put those feelings. She needed to hear them, Maya said gently. Just like you needed to read her letters. She studied him carefully. Rose asked me to come here as a kind of mediator. Not to take sides, but to help you both find a way forward, whatever that means. Jack nodded, grateful for Maya's measured approach. I wrote her a letter, he said, pulling it from his pocket. It doesn't fix anything, but it's a start. Maya took the letter, then shared what Rose had told her about finding the recordings and her reaction to them. She thought you were indifferent, Maya explained. Finding out you were actually paralyzed by fear, it changes things for her. Does it change enough? Jack asked, the question barely audible. I don't know, Maya answered honestly. But what I do know is that you both still love each other. And sometimes, that's enough to start rebuilding. They talked for nearly an hour, Jack explaining his perspective and Maya helping him understand Rose's. Not defending or excusing, but building bridges of understanding between two people who had lost their way to each other. Finally, Maya texted Rose, coffee shop. When you're ready. 20 minutes later, Rose walked through the door. Jack stood, uncertain of how to greet her. They'd been married for 7 years, yet suddenly felt like strangers. I read your journal, Rose said quietly. I read your letters, Jack replied. They sat across from each other, Maya between them, a physical representation of the distance they'd need to bridge. The car, Jack began hesitantly. It was never about the car, was it? Rose shook her head. It was about presence. About showing up, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I thought I was protecting you by staying strong, Jack admitted. But all I did was leave you to face the hardest parts alone. And I thought I was protecting you by not burdening you with my fears, Rose countered. So I turned to everyone but you. Maya gently guided the conversation, helping them express feelings without accusations, fears without judgment. Slowly, the wall between them began to show cracks. I don't know if I can go back to how things were, Rose said finally. Too much has happened. I don't want to go back, Jack replied, surprising her. Back means the same patterns, the same mistakes. I want to go forward, together, if you'll have me. But differently this time. Rose looked at him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. What would differently look like? Therapy, together, Jack suggested. Learning to talk about the hard things instead of running from them. Being present, even when it's uncomfortable. And the car? Rose asked. Jack smiled sadly. It's just a car, Rose. We can sell it, keep it, whatever you want. It was never about the car. Rose reached across the table, tentatively touching his hand. I want to fight for us, Jack. I'm just not sure how. That's the first time in 2 years we've wanted the same thing at the same time, Jack said, a glimmer of hope in his voice. Maybe that's a place to start. Before we continue this journey with Jack and Rose, I want to take a moment to thank you for being here. If this story is touching your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel. These moments of truth and healing are what connect us all, and your subscription helps these stories reach others who might need them most. The coffee shop conversation had been a beginning, tentative and fragile, but a beginning nonetheless. As they left, Jack handed Rose the keys to the CRV. "Would you like to take it for a drive?" he asked. Not as a celebration, just as a first step. Rose hesitated before taking the keys. "Okay, but I'm driving." They thanked Maya for her mediation and promised to keep her updated. As they walked to the car, the physical space between them felt symbolic, close enough to talk, but not touching. Two people finding their way back to each other after a long separation. The new car smell enveloped them as they settled inside. Rose adjusted the mirrors and seat, familiarizing herself with the controls. Jack sat quietly in the passenger seat, watching her methodical movements. "It really is a beautiful car," Rose admitted as they pulled away from the curb. "The exact model I mentioned all those years ago." "You have an excellent memory," Jack replied. Rose navigated through familiar streets, both of them silent for several minutes. Finally, she spoke. "I don't know where to go." Jack considered for a moment. "What about Westfield Park, where we had our first date?" Rose glanced at him, surprised. "You remember that?" "I remember everything about that day," Jack said softly. "The red dress you wore. How nervous I was. The way you laughed when I tried to impress you by naming all the constellations, even though I only knew 3. A small smile touched Rose's lips as she turned toward the park. "And I pretended to be impressed anyway." The park was quiet on a weekday morning. A few joggers, some parents with strollers, but mostly empty. Rose parked near the lake where they had walked on their first date 7 years earlier. They got out and naturally gravitated toward the water. "I used to come here sometimes," Rose said as they walked along the shore. "During treatment. On days when I felt strong enough. I'd sit on that bench and watch the ducks and try to remember what normal felt like." Jack looked at her, pain etched on his face. "I didn't know." "There's a lot we didn't know about each other these past 2 years," Rose replied, "even though we lived in the same house." They found the bench she mentioned and sat down, a careful distance between them. "In your letters," Jack began, his voice unsteady, "you mentioned specific moments, times when you needed me and I wasn't there. I want to address each one." Rose turned to face him, surprised by his directness. "The night before your first chemo session," he continued, "you asked me to hold you, to tell you everything would be okay even if I didn't believe it. I made an excuse about work and left you alone." Jack took a deep breath. "The truth is, I was terrified. Not just of you being sick, but of saying the wrong thing, of making promises I couldn't keep. So I ran. And I'm deeply sorry for that." Rose nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "Your birthday during treatment," Jack continued. "You wanted to drive somewhere, anywhere, just to feel normal. I claimed a deadline. But really, I was afraid of seeing you happy for a day, only to watch you suffer again afterward. It was selfish, and I'm sorry." He went through each moment Rose had mentioned in her letters, her hair loss, the midnight fears, the doctor's appointments he'd missed, acknowledging each one and offering no excuses, only understanding and remorse. When he finished, Rose wiped her eyes. "I thought you were pulling away because you couldn't stand to look at me anymore. Because I was damaged goods." "Never," Jack said firmly. "You are the most beautiful person I've ever known. Inside and out. Cancer didn't change that. My fear did." Rose looked out at the water, gathering her thoughts. "I need to apologize too. For assuming the worst instead of asking. For protecting you from my fears instead of sharing them. For not demanding more when I needed it." She turned back to him. "And for believing, even for a moment, that you could betray me like that. When I found that phone." "It was a reasonable conclusion," Jack admitted. "I was being secretive, defensive, coming home late. All the signs were there. But I should have trusted you enough to ask directly," Rose said. "Instead, I built this whole narrative in my head. By the time I found the phone, I was already planning my exit." They sat in silence for a moment, watching a family of ducks paddle across the lake. "So where do we go from here?" Jack finally asked. Rose considered the question carefully. "I think we start with honesty. Complete honesty, even when it's uncomfortable." "Agreed," Jack nodded. "And therapy, together, This time, Dr. Thomas recommended someone who specializes in couples affected by serious illness. Dr. Caldwell mentioned the same thing, Rose said with a small smile. She said we're experiencing a common pattern, pulling apart during crisis, then struggling to reconnect afterward. Jack tentatively reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. What else? How do we rebuild? Time together, Rose said firmly. Real time. Not just existing in the same house. Weekly date nights, at minimum.
No phones, no distractions.
Just us. I'd like that, Jack agreed. And I was thinking about the car. Rose looked at him questioningly. It represents everything wrong with how I've approached our problems, throwing money at something that needed presence instead, Jack explained. Maybe we should sell it. And do what with the money? Rose asked. Jack squeezed her hand gently. Whatever would mean something to both of us. A vow renewal ceremony, maybe? A trip we plan together? Something that represents a fresh start. Rose considered this. I've always wanted to see the Northern Lights. Remember how we talked about that before we got married? It was on our someday list. I remember, Jack said, smiling at the memory. Norway in winter. That would mean more to me than any car, Rose admitted. A shared experience instead of a thing. They continued talking as the morning turned to afternoon, making concrete plans for moving forward. Weekly therapy sessions. Date nights every Wednesday. A daily check-in where they would each share one fear and one hope. Small, achievable steps toward reconnect Ion. As the sun reached its peak, they walked back to the car, standing closer now than they had before. There's one more thing, Rose said, stopping before they reached the CRV. I need you to understand that this won't be easy or quick. Trust takes time to rebuild. I know, Jack replied seriously. I'm not expecting a quick fix. I'm committed to the long haul, to showing up every day, even on the hard days. Especially on the hard days. Rose studied his face. And if the cancer comes back someday? Because that fear never really goes away. Jack took both her hands in his, meeting her gaze directly. Then we face it together. No running, no hiding. I'll be right beside you through every appointment, every treatment, every midnight fear. I promise. That's a big promise, Rose whispered. It's the only one that matters, Jack replied. As they drove home, the space between them felt different, still present, but bridgeable. The car that had been meant as a grand gesture had instead become the vessel for their first honest conversation in years. When they arrived home, Jack took a deep breath before speaking. Would it be okay if I came back tonight? Not to pretend everything is fixed, but to start the process of fixing it. Rose nodded. I'd like that. We could make dinner together. Something simple. Like we used to on Sundays before. Jack trailed off. Before everything, Rose finished. Yes, exactly like that. As they walked to the front door, Jack stopped. The car. We'll sell it, Rose decided. And book those tickets to Norway for the winter. A new memory to build on. Jack smiled, feeling hope for the first time in 2 years. Presence over presents. Vulnerability over pride, Rose added, returning his smile. It wasn't a perfect resolution. The damage of 2 years couldn't be repaired in a single day. But as they entered their home together, both committed to rebuilding what fear had dismantled. They had something they'd lost long ago, a shared purpose, a path forward, together. Hey beautiful souls, if this story is touching your heart, remember that one click can help others find healing too. Hit that subscribe button to join our family of storytellers and listeners. Every relationship deserves a second chance when both people are willing to do the work. 6 months later. Snow fell gently outside the glass-roof cabin, each flake catching the light from the fire crackling in the stone hearth. Rose stood by the window, wrapped in a thick sweater, her eyes fixed on the dark northern sky. Any sign yet? Jack asked, appearing beside her with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. Rose shook her head. The forecast said they should be visible tonight, but you never know. Nature follows its own schedule. She accepted the mug, their fingers brushing in a way that still sent a small current between them. 6 months of deliberate rebuilding had changed their relationship in ways both subtle and profound. The cabin in northern Norway was smaller than what they might have chosen before, the money from selling the CRV stretching further when they opted for cozy over luxurious. But it was perfect. A glass roof for aurora viewing, a fireplace for warmth, and most importantly, no distractions from each other. How was your session with Dr. Larson? Rose asked, settling onto the window seat. Their commitment to therapy hadn't wavered, even during this trip. Jack had spoken with their couple's therapist via video call that morning. Good, Jack replied, sitting beside her. We talked about anticipatory anxiety, how I'm doing with the upcoming 5-year checkup. Rose nodded, appreciating his directness. Gone were the days of avoidance and deflection. They had learned to move toward difficult topics instead of away from them. And, she prompted. I'm nervous, Jack admitted. But not paralyzed like before. Dr. Larson helped me work through some breathing techniques for when the anxiety spikes. Rose reached for his hand. Thank you for telling me. For not trying to protect me from your fears. That's our deal, right? No more protection, just presence. Jack squeezed her hand. What about you? How are you feeling about the checkup? Rose took a sip of her chocolate before answering. Scared, obviously. But different than before. Last time, I was afraid of dying and leaving you. This time, I'm just afraid of the process, the waiting, the tests. But I know whatever happens, we'll face it together. This was the new normal between them. Honest conversations about hard things, fears acknowledged rather than hidden. It hadn't been an easy road. The first months of reconciliation had been filled with painful revelations, old hurts resurfacing, moments of doubt. But they had persisted. Jack glanced at his watch. Almost time for the support group call. Should we move to the bedroom? Rose nodded. Perhaps their most meaningful decision had been starting an online support group for couples affected by serious illness. Twice a month, they hosted video calls with other partners struggling with the same issues they had faced. The caregiver's guilt, the patient's isolation, the communication breakdowns that often followed medical crises. I still can't believe how many couples reached out after Natasha shared our story in that cancer support forum, Rose said as they moved to the bedroom, laptops in hand. People need to know they're not alone, Jack replied. That what they're feeling is normal, even when it's difficult. The support group had become their shared purpose, a way to transform their pain into something helpful for others. Jack, once so reluctant to discuss emotions, now spoke openly about his experience as a caregiver who didn't know how to care. Rose shared her journey from resentment to understanding. Together, they created a space where other couples could find the guidance they had lacked. After the hour-long session, helping a newly diagnosed couple understand the emotional landscape ahead, they returned to the living room, emotionally drained but fulfilled. That reminded me of us, early on, Jack said, stoking the fire. The way he kept saying he was fine when he clearly wasn't. Rose smiled sadly. And how she couldn't understand why he was pulling away right when she needed him most. Do you think they'll make it? Jack asked. I don't know. But they're talking now, and that's the first step. Rose paused, looking out the window again. Jack, look. Above the snow-covered pines, the sky had come alive. Green and purple lights danced across the darkness, rippling like curtains in a celestial wind. The northern lights, finally making their appearance. They rushed outside, bundled in their warmest clothes, breath-forming clouds in the frigid air. Standing in the snow, heads tilted back, they watched in or as nature put on its most spectacular show. It's even more beautiful than I imagined, Rose whispered, her face illuminated by the unearthly glow. Jack wasn't looking at the sky. He was looking at his wife, the wonder in her eyes, the smile on her lips, the life that radiated from her. Yes, it is. She caught him staring and laughed. You're supposed to be watching the aurora, not me. I've seen what matters most, he replied simply. Rose leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around her, a gesture that had once been automatic, then impossible, and now was precious again. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the lights dance above them. Remember our first date? Rose asked suddenly. How you tried to impress me with constellation names. Jack laughed. And I only knew the Big Dipper, Orion, and Cassiopeia. But you said them with such confidence, Rose teased. I didn't have the heart to tell you I took astronomy in college. I found out when I saw your textbook a week later, Jack admitted. I was mortified. The memory hung between them, sweet and uncomplicated, a reminder of who they had been before cancer, before fear, before distance. But now it felt like more than just nostalgia. It felt like possibility. "Dance with me," Jack asked impulsively. "There's no music," Rose pointed out. Jack pulled out his phone, scrolling until he found what he was looking for. The opening notes of At Last by Etta James, their wedding song, filled the crisp night air. "Now there is," he said, extending his hand. Under the dancing aurora, they moved together, her head resting on his shoulder, his arms holding her close. Not with the unconscious ease of their early marriage, but with the deliberate tenderness of two people who knew exactly how precious their connection was, because they had almost lost it. "I never thought we'd find our way back here," Rose confessed. "There were days I was sure it was over." "Me too," Jack admitted. "Especially that day, with the car, the party, all the truths coming out at once." "I'm glad we fought for this," Rose said. "For us." The music continued as the lights painted the sky above them. Two people, dancing in the snow, rebuilt but not unchanged. The scars of their journey visible only to each other, in the careful way they communicated, in their deliberate practices of connection, in their shared understanding of how easily love could slip away when fear took hold. "You know what I realized recently," Jack said as they swayed to the music. "The car I was so focused on, it was really just another way of running. If I concentrated on saving money, on the surprise, on the logistics, I didn't have to face what was really happening between us. And I was planning my exit instead of fighting for what we had," Rose acknowledged. "We were both choosing the easier path." "Not easier in the long run," Jack pointed out. "Just easier in the moment." When the song ended, they remained in each other's arms, reluctant to break the connection. Above them, the aurora began to fade, the cosmic light show drawing to a close. "We should go in," Rose said finally. "It's freezing out here." Back inside, they built up the fire and settled on the couch, wrapped in a shared blanket. The intimacy between them had been slowly rekindled over the past 6 months, not rushed, not assumed, but carefully nurtured with patience and intention. "I have something for you," Jack said, reaching into his pocket. Not a grand gesture, just a small one. He handed her a thin silver chain with a small pendant, a simple aurora borealis design crafted from local silver. "It's beautiful," Rose said, touching it gently. "Turn it over," Jack urged. On the back was a tiny engraving, present in every moment. "Yot er." "Our new vow to each other," Jack explained. "No more running, no more hiding. Just presence, even when it's hard." Rose's eyes filled with tears as she fastened the necklace around her neck. "It's perfect." As the fire crackled and snow continued to fall outside, they talked about the future, the upcoming 5-year cancer checkup, their plans to expand the support group, the everyday challenges of maintaining the connection they'd worked so hard to rebuild. There were no guarantees, no certainty that hardship wouldn't visit them again. But now they had tools they'd lacked before: honesty, vulnerability, and the hard-won knowledge that love required not just feeling, but action. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't surprised me that day," Rose mused. "If you'd come home at the regular time, if I'd had a chance to hide all the party preparations." "We'd still be drifting," Jack said. "Two people living separate lives under the same roof." "The day that could have ended us actually saved us," Rose realized. Jack nodded. "Sometimes you need everything to fall apart before you can rebuild it stronger." Outside, the last of the northern lights faded from the sky, leaving behind stars that seemed brighter somehow against the darkness. Inside, a man and woman who had nearly lost each other held on tightly, knowing exactly how precious and precarious love could be. As Rose drifted to sleep against his shoulder, Jack whispered words he'd once been too afraid to say. "Whatever comes next, we face it together. I promise." And this time, both of them believed it. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't what you buy, it's showing up, being present, and choosing love even when it's hard. And sometimes, the moment when everything falls apart becomes the foundation on which something stronger can be built. Thank you for staying with us through Jack and Rose's journey. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to join our family of storytellers and listeners. Every subscription helps these stories of healing reach someone who might need them today. Until next time, remember that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice we make every day.